Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of the iOS Lead Essentials podcast. Here we discuss the strategies in your journey to become a complete senior iOS developer. My name is Bogdan, I'm a senior iOS developer and lead instructor in the iOS Lead Essentials program, the online training program for iOS developers who want to become complete senior developers. Today our special guest is John from the United States, an iOS developer and student of the iOS Lead Essentials program. Hi, John, and welcome.
Hi, happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So, John, can you tell me a bit about your achievements in the program that we'll be discussing today?
Yeah. So since starting my career in iOS development, I've been able to double my total compensation in just the span of a few years. And I really owe a lot of that to a lot of the things that I learned in the program. And just recently, I accepted a new position in which I'm able to relocate to one of my top locations. So I'm really excited about that.
Wow, that's very nice to hear. So, congrats. Uh, that must feel really good to be able to move to your preferred go-to place.
Yeah, I'm really happy about it.
Awesome. And for you watching this podcast, stay until the end to learn how John did it, and you can achieve it too. Our goal is to find replicable steps that others can follow to achieve the same. So, okay, John, let's start with your background. How long have you been an iOS developer?
Yeah, so currently I'm a mid-level iOS developer. I've been working professionally in iOS development for just over 3 years now. Before that, I was learning iOS development on the side and during summers in college because I knew that it was what I wanted to do. And so I did that. I got started, and now I'm doing it.
Nice, nice. So it's kind of love at first sight for you, right?
Yeah,
Just wanted to do more and more of that. Okay.
yeah,
I remember a similar feeling that I had when I started with iOS in my first years. Just wanted to like explore everything, try it out, work as much as possible, uh, discovering all the new things that Apple was making available. So I totally understand.
yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super fascinating because every year there's just new things to learn and
Yeah.
to experiment with, and it's just like really constantly new, which is really good for job satisfaction and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's like you're every year after WWDC, you're kind of like in the Christmas morning, like opening some new presents.
Yep.
That excitement going. Okay, just a bit of a joke there, but now getting more serious. Like I'm especially curious for a guy like you that started like I would say it's in the beginning of your career. So doing this for 3 years, how do you see your career progressing in a longer term? So do you have some like bigger term goals that you've set already?
Yeah, ideally in within like the next few years or so, I'd like to be leading a team of iOS developers and really spreading a lot of uh, the knowledge that I've learned in this program because I feel like that's really just transformed my entire like thought process in a day to day, and I feel like I'm able to spread that to those who maybe haven't been exposed to this type of stuff that we teach here.
That's a very good point, and I think it's a natural progression once you feel you're proficient enough that you can deal with your own tasks, with your own projects, then to think about the next step as leading or at least teaching, because they are two different things,
Yeah.
and they are both required to be a successful leader. But yeah, I like the fact that you've already thought about this a bit, and yeah, I think if you approach it with the same dedication as you did with the program and other things you've done so far, it's definitely reachable. It's gonna provoke you as well. One of the things I noticed when people go into lead positions, let's say, it's technically maybe they're in a place where things are smooth and everything, but there are other challenges on soft skills, on people skills, like being able to mix and match all the skills in your team to have a successful group that can deliver, that can help each other. So it's very challenging. At least that's what I've seen in my share. So, but I'm sure you'll get there and you'll do just fine, especially since in the program, besides all the technical knowledge, there's also this part about leadership, about just having like clear steps to, I don't know, organizing a team, having metrics, having like knowing where to pay attention, which aspects are really important, stuff like that. So it's definitely something I would have benefited when I started to lead teams. Back then there wasn't too much guidance available, so at least in iOS, maybe other teams had more available. So yeah, I wasn't moving the conversation about me. I think it's just something really, really incredible that will happen in your career, and I'm just trying to, I don't know, give you a heads up or something like that.
Yeah. There's like a few of the like mentoring sessions that I've seen with people who are sort of have been in that position before as well, and like the knowledge that they've gotten from Caio and Mike and everything has just been like really interesting to me, because like that's something that you're not going to learn on the job, right? It's going to be something that you're going to have to learn outside of the job, and you're just going to have to apply it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's less straightforward, I would say.
Yeah.
But again, like if it was straightforward, then a lot of people would be able to achieve that more easily. So it's like whatever. That's why you have like a ladder in every company, in every position, just being able to like have different steps. So as you move, some people just are happy to stay at step one and just be a developer, and that's totally fine if that's your goal. That there's, I don't know, steps to leadership until you become CTO or CEO or something like that. So it's like whatever, pick your own goals and try to smash them, I guess. So that's why, like, you maybe have 100 developers in a company, but only one CTO. So it's like as you progress, less and less people get there. So it's an interesting concept, at least to me. Okay. So how'd you find out about the iOS Lead Essentials program?
Yeah, so I had been following Kyle and Mike on their YouTube channel for a couple of years, and I had just like kept seeing this thing about this program, and I wasn't really sure what it was, but I would always see like, the testimonials from people who participated in the program and them talking about how it impacted their career, and I was just really drawn to that because they just seemed like they were in a position that I was kind of in at one point. So yeah, I was like really motivated by just seeing other people succeed and wanting to know how they did it.
Yeah, that's a good point, I guess. When I was actually a student of the program, and before that, I remember just seeing those testimonials as well, and they all are very inspirational, I guess. People really transformed their careers, their approaches after going through the program. So yeah, it's definitely something like you have the feeling of I need to find out more, like how does this work, and awesome.
Yeah.
Can you remember at that time before joining, like what did you had issues with? Where were the pain points of the day-to-day dev life, like stuff like that?
Yeah. So at the time I was dealing with like a lot of imposter syndrome, even though I was actually progressing in my career. Like I was, doing well and I was excelling and I was getting promoted but I always just felt like something was wrong. Like I didn't know anything about testing and I didn't really know like how to approach problems like on my own. I would always just kind of rely heavily on like what people online had been doing to for similar problems. And so that to me was like really inefficient because I was just kind of spinning my wheels in place and I wasn't really sure how to progress beyond that.
That's interesting. I guess not a lot of people feel that when they like apply solutions that others mentioned online somewhere online. Then they just like, okay, it works, it's fine. Um, but if you have that meta awareness, you're kind of something doesn't click here, right? So
Yep.
where do these solutions come from, or how do you decide which one to apply or something like that? So um, yeah, I totally understand, and especially what you mentioned like imposter syndrome. A lot of people deal with that, especially when they progress, because they say, okay, the company offered me this new position, but is it fully I don't know, fully on merit, or is it just because they need somebody in that position? So how good am I really getting? Am I like, or maybe you notice things that you struggle with on a day-to-day basis, and you focus maybe a bit more on these. If you're in a small team, then you have less people to compare yourself to, so you really don't know what the level is.
Yep.
So you're kind of like, I don't know, like should a mid developer know all the patterns, know some patterns? Like, I don't know. You're
Yeah.
just guessing. So
Yeah. At the time, I was on a very small team, so it was just me and someone who had like 10 times as much experience as me. So like it definitely leaned into like having imposter syndrome because I'm just like nowhere near like that level.
right. Yeah, that can be intimidating as well. So when you see somebody that seems at least to have it all going, you have no idea how they got there. So it's just intimidating. Like you think they're made of a different material than you are. Um, yeah, I had the same issue with some of the people I mentored over time, and I worked a lot to just try to tell them, okay, now I look like I know many of these things, but trust me, I was in your shoes. I know how it is. Like I remember when I didn't know how to, I don't know, write a test, when to like understand architecture in some way that you can at least compare solutions and say this is probably better for us, at least that. So but again, having the senior is super helpful because you can extract a lot of and just learn things from them, but also intimidating because you don't know the steps to which they got to the point you see. And sometimes you, like some people just, I don't know, idolize like more senior developers. They think like, oh, this guy knows everything, like I'm never gonna be this good. And um, unfortunately it's not true, but it is what it is. Like I guess it applies to other jobs, to other areas as well. It's not just developers, but yeah, it's a tough one, for sure. And the sooner you're able to deal with that, not to solve it entirely, just to like get a hang of it, it gets better, I guess. You can tell me more, if you feel like it, but that's at least what I saw. Uh,
Yeah. And there was like one specific challenge that I had ran into at the job I was at. So like we had a new feature coming where we wanted to build like a share extension. so that we could use the share sheet to interact with our app in like an entirely new way that we hadn't really done before. And that was like a challenge to me because it involved a lot of like architecture decisions, as well as like how do we like share existing code so that we don't have to like completely rewrite this in this new extension, because it's not really designed to just go in there. So you have to sort of rearrange a lot of things, and when it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, doing features like extensions and where you have to share code, you have to like understand a bit better how binaries work, like libraries and frameworks and all of that. It can be daunting, at least if you haven't done it before. So yeah,
Yeah.
totally get it.
And like all the examples that you can find online are very simple,
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
not from scratch. And it's like, okay, well, I get that, but how do I fit that into, you know, this project that's been around for however many years?
Yeah, there's a huge gap between tutorials and
Yep.
easy lectures and your project. So there's always a challenge there, but yeah, it happens. You also mentioned testing, like not knowing anything about testing, and I'm just curious, how do you feel the need? Or was it a requirement? Was it just something you felt you should be doing? Like, how do you discover that you don't know testing and you should? Like, how was that?
Well, it was about like a while after I had been in this position, and I sort of realized that I hadn't been writing tests, but I feel like I should be, because anytime I have to test something, I have to do it manually. So I have to, you know, build the app, grab, you know, the simulator of the device, and then navigate to the screen, you know, interact in a certain way. And that to me just felt like really wasteful. So like I just felt like something was wrong there, that like there's got to be a better way to do this, because the only testing strategy I really knew at the time was like the one where you go into Xcode and you sort of record like your interactions on the screen, and then that was like, okay, well that's like fine, but it's still kind of the same problem because it takes a long time to do that. So I just felt like there just had to be something better.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I totally understand how you probably know other developers are testing. I especially like this part of understanding that you do some repetitive time-taking tasks which you don't know how to speed up. So, but I also know developers that never thought about, yeah, how else could you do it? Like you just boot up the simulator, you go to the 10th screen in your app, and then you try something out and go back to Xcode, change a line of code, rebuild, go there again, like doing
Yep.
that for, I don't know, a few hours just to fix a small issue. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
um,
And
I
it,
sp-
worst of all, it makes you not want to do things like iteratively. So you don't want to do things in small chunks, because making a small change is going to just add this whole like buffer of time that you have to
yeah.
account for. So you just start writing a bunch of code and you test it all at once, and then you kind of just, you know, make sure it works, but maybe
Yeah,
it's not all necessary.
actually, a very good point. I know, especially teams that have bigger apps, bigger projects that take longer to build, have this, let's say, change in behavior where they kind of make several changes at once for the reason you mentioned, just to avoid build time. So you kind of have build once and deploy because it takes like minutes or worse in some cases. So
Right.
yeah, I've seen people just change that behavior and make a lot of changes at once, and that's very dangerous, I guess.
And it's also just bad for the commit history, because you can't like see why this small chunk of code was changed. It's just all part of this one big chunk that you have to sort of go and dig through, which is very hard on future readers of the code.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, that's another one where the code base history is very hard to extract any info from. You got like massive changes in each commit, so then there's nothing useful there. And it's really hard when you have like a huge commit, even if you're super diligent, you can't write I don't know, 20 lines commit message, right, to describe everything that you did. So some 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 information there just gets lost. And especially with longer term projects, I saw myself many times going back to the Git history and searching like why did we change that? Why did we remove a component, or I don't know, did change a setting value? And unless there's a commit with a clear message explaining that, it's really hard to understand. So sometimes you don't know, like, do we still need that? Is it you don't know. It's probably remains untouched because you fear you might break something. And
Yep.
again, if you don't have the test to back you up, or at least to look at the test and say, are we using that? Are we testing that? There's no context. So I think those two that we mentioned are the ones, like testing and commit history, are the ones that really can help you understand the transformation of your code base over time and see why you made certain decisions, how you made them, and it can really help you move forward.
Yeah. One other thing that I had a lot of problems with when I was thinking about joining the program was that when a new requirement change would come, it usually resulted in a lot of changes to things that I sort of felt like I was doing something wrong, because I was just like having to change like a bunch of classes or a bunch of, things that are interacting together just to, accommodate this new requirement change. And that to me was something that really blew me away with the program, because we were constantly, making changes and improvements, and like every time, we're running the tests and they're passing. So like I was like, how are they doing that? Because that is something that I just have had tons of time wasted doing, because I just have to, like redo things and almost entirely because to accommodate something.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I totally agree, especially being able to be backed by tests. So then you feel a lot more confident to make these improvements at every step, because at every step you see something like you see a simpler API, a simpler algorithm. You just go in and make the change in a separate commit. If test passed, you are confident. So yeah, it's really powerful to have that, and you can see it. You can see the effect over time, where a code base just gets better and better over time because everybody's just super confident. There's no let's call in John because he knows that part, and unless he reviews it we cannot merge it. There's nothing like that. It's just like, are the test passing? Yeah, okay, merge it, ship it, it's ready for deployment. And that's super powerful to have. Whereas the opposite is also true. Like, people just are scared. I remember being scared of many times of I had an idea like how the code could be better in a component, or just had some refactoring ideas, but I'd say no.
Yep.
This is too dangerous. Like, I'm gonna mess something up. I don't want that. Then I have to like stay overtime to fix it, or maybe have a crash in production, or like no. Let's just leave it as it is. And those small decisions just accumulate over time in either direction. So it's either getting better and better, or worse and worse. And over time, like if you have like 5-10 year project code base, then it's a lot different place that they can get just because of these mechanics, I would say. So yeah, totally understand that, and it's really powerful to have. Awesome. So just to circle back, like recap a bit, you mentioned having these struggles, like a bit of imposter syndrome, not knowing anything about testing, like approaching problems, just deciding how to solve something, how to deal with requirement changes, and then you found about the program and decided to join. Like, can you first tell me how you decided to join and if you have second thoughts?
Yeah, so when I decided to join, I was actually considering doing like a master's program because I was like, well, I feel like I'm not getting things, so like I need to be learning or something. So I'm like looking into, master's programs, but there's not really master's programs in iOS development, which is like what I wanted to do. So I was like, well, I could maybe like transition into something else slightly, but I don't know that I really want to do that. And yeah, I just saw this course and it's, marketed as like become a complete senior iOS developer. And I really think that's true because it really gives you like a solid foundation of things that you're might not be exposed to in your current position. So yeah, I was like, I really just like took like a leap of faith because like all the testimonials that I had seen in the community, as well as like when I had attended like the first meeting and I had met other people in the community, there was one person in particular there who had gone through the program and they were just sort of like talking about it. And I just like really like is something that has stuck with me a lot and really helped me like stay motivated to complete it because they knew something that I didn't, and like I yeah, wanted to experience it myself.
Awesome. Did you feel that it was, when you were checking the program out, did you feel that it was more than just a technical program, like improving your technical developer skills? Did you feel like it's more, or how do you saw that from an outsider's view, let's say?
Well, I saw it as like a really good opportunity to like learn how to build apps from scratch, which was something that I really thought like was important in my development growth because I had been working on projects that had existed, so I didn't build like this networking layer, this persistence layer, and all this sort of stuff that has been there. I just sort of like modify it to accommodate something new. So like I saw this as like a really good opportunity to build something from the ground up. And yeah, so that was like something that really I think helped my growth a lot because now like if I'm starting a new project, then it's like I want all of these benefits, like fast test times, fast build times, just like fast feedback in general so that I can continuously make improvements.
Yeah, very, very swell put it. Okay, so then you decided to join. What was your experience with the program? How do you connect with it first? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so actually when I had first joined the program, I didn't really start for a couple of months because it was like the holidays and just some other things, got in the way. But then after all of that, it was like winter time. I was stuck inside. So I was like, well, I'm just going to, grind out this course and I'm just going to, every day after work, do a little bit here, a little bit there, and just like keep going. And I'm really glad I did.
Nice. So how'd you do it? Like how much time, just a rough estimate, how much time per day did you allocate?
Yeah. So I would pretty much work on it, like a couple hours. So like maybe like 3 or 4, and I would watch a few videos, and my approach was essentially just, like, follow along with the video and then code along with them.
Right.
So I would just sort of have on one monitor the lectures, have on the other monitor my Xcode, and I would just type out what they're doing, and then, like, when I ran into problems, I would just pause the video, maybe go back, maybe like research how to like solve where I'm stuck at, and then that really helped me like really gain like a lot of new techniques because there's just like little things that Caio and Mike do, like, and they're just like interactions of the IDE that just like save a lot of time. And so like I started like adapting some of those as well, and just like my whole workflow just started to be different.
Yeah. It's a very good point because I mean there are the big skills there, the big techniques, stuff like that. But there's also a lot of small nuance details, but they add up so much, and you just get faster here, faster there. I don't know, when you navigate from one component to the other, when you move lines around. I know that was a one which I didn't use, and I saw Caio and Mike do for the first time in one of the videos, and I was like, whoa, wait, how'd you do that? Because I usually, at least in my experience, when I deal with a new IDE or new tool or something, I always look for the keyboard shortcuts, maybe try to write them down on a piece of paper, something like that, and try to get used to it, just to build that proficiency, build the speed. And I never used it with Xcode before. I would just copy or cut some code and move it, and it was two steps where I could have just do one, and it's maybe half a second difference, but if you do like scale that over, I don't know how many times you do it in a month, in a year, it's a big difference. So I'm glad you also notice these subtle differences, subtle improvements that you can make, because they really pay out over time.
And it also just leaked into like my mindset as I was writing code. Like before I would start writing code, I would like think kind of a little bit here and there, like how they are, like how are they approaching this problem? Like what are they talking about? Like how does this fit into the problems that I'm experiencing? So like that helped a lot too with just like tackling new problems that I hadn't been exposed to before, because I could sort of reason about in ways that I couldn't before about like how to start or like what decision makes sense here, because sometimes it's not clear.
Yeah. Would you say doing like test driving, doing testing, is the one of the key factors here, or do you think it's something different? It's just having the knowledge. Like how do you say that this has transformed for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think testing is just like a huge benefit, because when you can run tests in like a fraction of a second, that can confirm whether or not your changes are making the change that you expect, then you get that fast feedback loop, and then you're just like, okay, well now I'm on to like, the next part of this task. And so yeah, I think that helped a lot for sure, with just like thinking about testing. And it also just helps with like the design too, because like when you're not writing code that can easily accommodate tests, then you're, you know, maybe having like some kind of smell somewhere where like, oh, to write these tests, I need to mock like 7 different things. Like maybe that's bad design. So then like let's look at that. Like maybe there's something going on there.
Yeah, exactly. That was the point I was trying to get from you, because I know I feel about it that way when I test drive. Decision making is a lot more straightforward. So I remember where I would just, I needed to build a component, and I would change my mind a few times when I was building it. So start with an idea, then move things around a lot, then maybe move back to the original idea, stuff like that. So that overall required a lot of time. Whereas where you test drive it, just putting each test in place, I think kind of drives the design, and you don't go back and forth so much, at least in my experience. So I think that was another game changer. But it's just a technique. Like, of course you get better at designing things, but just testing, test driving is really answering a lot of the questions about what you're building, right? So when you start with the simplest test, and then you move on, and you kind of discover what you're building along the way, right? You put abstractions in place just to be able to test. So again, that was a major struggle, at least for me. I remember when at some point we were testing after writing the feature. So like you said, you see like now I need to mock 7 dependencies, and some of them are just not injectable, like they're hard coded. Now I can't test my components, so I need to, I don't know, resort to some weird solutions there.
Yep.
So yeah, totally get it. Okay, but You told me you did like a good hours per day to go through the program and just coding along. So at this pace, which is kind of a strong pace, how long did it take to finish the program?
Yeah, so like when I had really started taking it seriously, it took me about like 3 to 4 months of doing that every day. What really slowed me down a lot was just because I was coding along with the program, but I feel like that really helped me absorb just like what we had just talked about.
Right. Did you ever feel like, okay, you maybe watched a part of the lecture and said, okay, I got this, and then trying to go to Xcode and put it in practice and not being able to? Because I know when I was a student, I did. So,
Definitely, yeah.
so I'm not alone. Okay. It's just that, and I think it's really important why I'm actually making this point is just coding, just applying the thing that you saw in any learning process is very different. Like at some points, you just might feel that you understand the concept, the idea, and then when you try to put it in practice, it's not that natural. So, but I understand that that's very important for the learning process. So especially the part where you try to remember what you learned like a few minutes ago, where you struggle like, how was this? Like that, especially that part, it's where some new synapses start to get created to fire, and it's super helpful to be able to store that in a longer term memory. So yeah,
Yeah.
I had a similar process when I was going to the lectures as a student. So yeah,
Or
and
even you just start to have like questions about how they're doing things, and like the whole community is like really great for that because a lot of people have maybe had the same thought as you, and then like you've sort of explored that already, and like maybe why that's not a good approach, or maybe why that doesn't make sense here. So like yeah, definitely has helped like trying to apply it.
okay, so now looking back to the things you mentioned in the beginning, like having some imposter syndrome, some, of course, not knowing how to test, anything about testing, how to approach problem solving. How do you feel the the program has helped you with these issues?
Well, I think it really just gave me like a strong like foundation and vocabulary of like how to sort of reason about problems. So like I feel like I started to ask more meaningful questions, which allowed me to get better responses from pursuing like answers online and stuff if I like was really stuck. And like even just like maybe like one thing that changed drastically for me was that I started using the official documentation more rather than like Stack Overflow and whatnot. So like I started getting like a deeper understanding of like just the Swift language in general from that.
Yeah, that's very nice. And to me, it's always a bugger where people just go to Stack Overflow and never go to the official documentation, which most of the time has the right answers. So I'm also glad you mentioned that. I think it's another tiny habit that you change, you make, and then it reaps benefits over time.
Definitely.
Okay, I want to talk to you about the things we mentioned in the beginning, like being able to, like over a span of a few years, just being able to get some new positions, some getting accepted through some interviews, increasing your salary. So if you can elaborate a bit on that, so people watching can just try to see how you did it and maybe get some tips on how to approach similar challenges. That would
Yeah.
be awesome.
So when I was about like 2/3 of the way through the program, I started to explore other opportunities. So like I started to sort of practice for interviews and get ready for that. And then I ended up at that time landing two out of the two offers that I had applied for, like relatively quickly, and it was really due to a lot of just like being able to explain some of the things in the program. Like even if like maybe I didn't fully quite get it yet because I wasn't fully through and whatnot, I was like still like in that stage, or I was out of that stage where like I don't know what I don't know. Now it's like I know what I don't know, but now I'm like learning that, and now I'm like learning why that's important and why it can save us a lot of time as developers. Yeah. So as far as the interviews go, they were essentially just like not like these sort of like coding puzzle type problems. It was more like pair sessions, take home projects, things of that sort, where I think the things that you learn in this program can really excel because you just have like a lot more opportunity to sort of like work on like real world like type problems and like actual like apps.
Yeah, totally. And I think overall, the first impact that you make on in an interview process is how you articulate yourself. So I think that's another strong point you get, where you just start to understand where all the concepts fit, and you can express better when you talk about solutions, when you talk about why you want to approach it in a certain way. And I think that helps. It shows the, I don't know, like the picture of a professional from the interviewer's point of view. So they say, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about, so he's probably very good.
Yeah, and
I
even
think that's
talking with some of the members of the team, like after I had been hired, they were like, they had mentioned that like I sort of like knew a lot of things that like people who maybe have like a lot more experience than me like didn't really like know about. And that was like a really like key standout to them because they were like, this guy, only has like a couple years experience, but he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. So
yeah.
like, let's um, let's bring him on.
Yeah, and I always say this, like the number of years you've been doing something does not equivalent to the experience you have. So if you do the same repetitive Stack Overflow copy and paste for 5 years, you're not better. You're just maybe at the same level. So that's why I'm really underlying, and I think it's awesome that you achieved this level in 3 years, is because you haven't, I don't know, wasted a lot of time. So you put your time into learning, into making sure you got all the basics right, and then building on top of that. So I think that's probably an ideal way to start up your career.
Yeah, definitely. Because like learning is super uncomfortable and like no one wants to be told that like the way that they've been doing something for, years and years is like totally wrong or maybe inefficient, or that there's like these other ways. And then it's just like people tend to stick to like a routine and they stick to like what they know. So like I think that benefited a lot for me because like I didn't have as much opportunity to gain that sort of like maybe stubbornness or something where like I'm not as open to new ideas and whatnot.
Yeah, I especially like that about younger developers. I guess they are a lot more flexible. They're a lot more open about learning things, about I don't know, just changing some of their pre-existing like ideas. Whereas the more you get older, the more senior you are, you're probably more rigid to change to new ideas. Like you said, if somebody comes after you've been doing testing for 5 years and say you're doing it wrong, you're probably going to be a bit ego driven and say like, no, 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 I know this, I'm been doing it for a long time. So whereas a junior is always like, can you teach me, like I want to learn how to do this. So it's a lot easier. So that's why you have these big jumps in progress in the beginning. Cool. So what about just how you managed to increase your salary in such a short time span? What strategy did you resort to?
Yeah. So I think unfortunately, like maybe one of the best ways to increase your salary is to change jobs, and that's just kind of really unfortunate because I think like companies would get a lot of value from like retaining talent.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you just like go and switch jobs and you can like prove that you're worthy through like the interview process and then like get brought on to like a new project, then like yeah, I mean, I think that that's like a really good way to do it because otherwise, there might just be who knows like in your way.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I mean, it's definitely the go-to way, like the easiest way to do that is through interviews. So if you're good at interviews, you can definitely make big jumps in your income. What I recommend to the people that ask me, because not everybody needs advice, is to try to first explore the idea of getting a big increase with the current company. One aspect of it is that if you put it on paper, just having an employee that leaves is definitely just very costly to a company because you have to hire somebody new. Probably you're required to pay them more. Then there's downtime and ramp up and all that stuff where they're not fully productive yet. So the company would benefit from, like you said, from retaining talent, and also for you as an employee, as an individual, where you already know how things are going. So sometimes it's just a matter of being open to your manager and talking about your aspirations, your desires, and they can most of the time or sometimes just think about their perspective and say, okay, we can definitely get more value from you and we would pay you more if you would do these things. And then it kind of falls into a nice win-win situation where they just think about it and tell you exactly where you're, I don't know, making value, bringing value to them, and where you could, right? So you kind of drive that along with them. So I always recommend people to explore that first before jumping to a new company, which sometimes it can be super nice and it can be a lot better, but sometimes even through a thorough interview process, you still don't know exactly what team you're joining. So it can be both ways. So
Yeah, it can definitely be scary. Like if you're on a team that you're, happy with and in a position that you really enjoy, but like you're just maybe not happy with like the compensation, then like joining a new job and like not knowing like how that whole interaction is going to be is like definitely really intimidating. But I think there's also like a lot of value that you can get from working on like different kinds of projects. So there's just like completely new types of problems that each business is facing. So
totally. And yeah, definitely, there's a bit of friction there, which forces you to grow. So
yep.
yeah, of course, it's beneficial, but you also don't want to be on the other side of the spectrum where you change jobs every 6 months or something like that. So it's kind of a balance, and everybody decides how they want to approach it.
Yeah. For me, it's been like sort of testing like my limits, like applying for jobs and going like, I don't think like maybe I'm capable of this job, but like what if I get it, And it's like this like higher position than like maybe like I'm at that level. So like I sort of use it think about it that way as well as like sort of like seeing where I'm at and evaluating that constantly.
Right. I really like the point about the thing you said in the beginning. What if? Like
Yeah.
that is a very powerful mentality. So sometimes when I had like a hard issue in front of me, I think I try to think like that. So what if? What if I can smash this? What if I could actually get that job that I think it's too daunting, but what if I could get it? So it's
Yeah.
very powerful. It gives you some I don't know, very I guess a lot of motivation and a lot of energy to attack it.
A lot of like direction too, because like if you're trying the like you're getting put in for those interviews or like called up and whatnot, then like and you're maybe you don't quite meet the expectations, then like you kind of know like okay, like in this situation like I needed to know this and I didn't, and like let me explore that more because it's going to be something that I'm likely going to need to know going forward.
That's it. Okay, so if we look back at the whole program experience, what would you say are the most impactful things that you learned? Can be practices, can be techniques, state of mind, like whatever. What was really the main takeaways for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things like diagrams, testing, design patterns, CI, CD. That was something in particular that I hadn't really been exposed to, um, but I really needed to know a lot about going into the next position. So, like, getting exposed to that through here and like having that sort of background definitely helped me a lot for sure. And then just like even just better usage of Git and like getting better at like my commit messages and like working in smaller chunks and like thinking about problems in like very tiny amounts.
Super. And at least I see some confident tone of voice when you talk about these things. So I think that's really important to be able to talk like that. So then you sound more I don't know, more professional, more credible.
Yeah, I mean like the whole like scope of like the problems that I had faced on the first project that I was working on versus the second was very different, and like we used a lot of like things that I hadn't really like used in like a production environment, like storyboards and zibs and like all of that stuff, having to dig into like build settings and like very like deep understandings of like even just like the history of the language, because the history of the project that you work on is going to be completely different on each project that you work on. So like there's going to be some kind of history there that you're going to have to like know a little bit about, because you're going to have to solve a problem using it one day.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, awesome. So I think, yeah, just to sum up, I think you have some really good results so far. I think you're definitely going in a direction where your career just gonna grow more and more. We talked about your longer term goals of being able to lead teams, which is also nice. So yeah, I think I'll be waiting to hear more about your journey in the future, and to support that. I think you're gonna have just very good results overall. Um, could you share some advice for people that want to achieve similar transformation that you did? What you think was instrumental to being able to get there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for sure joining the program. I think if you're someone who's in iOS development, then I would maybe even go as far as to say just like a software engineer in general, because a lot of the things that you learn in this program aren't specific to iOS. Like maybe we use, the native language and the native frameworks and all that, but like the principles and practices that you learn here can be applied in any language, and you can get a lot of value from that. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would have is that if something's not making sense to you, just keep pushing forward, because that was something that I think was instrumental for me, because I didn't really like understand like what the value was like of a lot of the things in the program until I was like very far along, and like these things started coming together and like very like new ways to me, and I was like, oh, like that makes so much sense. And like just by like persevering and just keep going and like little by little picking up a little thing from this lecture and a little thing from that, like yeah, I think just keep going.
Yeah, that's great advice. I would just double on that. I think when you try to get to acquire some new skills that are really hard and transformational, then you're not going to get them overnight, like just like that. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some maybe moments where you say, oh, this doesn't make sense, I need to do something. So I like how you approached it, so not getting stuck and making sure you just get exposed to that content over and over until it starts to make sense. And I think a lot of programs, a lot of books are like that, where the main information comes over and over again in different forms, in different angles. So at some point you just like start clicking and like makes, like you said, that aha moment where you say, oh, this makes so much sense now. It's awesome, and I think it's part of the journey. And some people just get discouraged there when it doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, this is not for me. Maybe I lack some basic knowledge to be able to grasp this. So I'm perfectly on board with the advice you shared. I think it's very important, and not just for development, for learning anything on a more generic matter, right?
Yeah. When I had like joined the program, I was like very anxious to, get to like the UI section of the program, because like everything that I was doing was like in the UI. So I was like, oh, like once I get there, like I'll be like learning the things that I need to know. And then like it was like around there where I like realized like all these things are coming together, and like the UI is like just another like layer, and like it doesn't have to contain everything and every responsibility, and like there's ways that we
Yeah,
can structure things and get a lot of value from them.
yeah, I like how you put it. Like it's just another tiny layer, right? Just plug and play, and it doesn't have to contain all the logic. I think that's probably where most things go wrong, at least in iOS projects that we see, is everything's in the UI layer, or the logic, or it's coupled with persistence, with networking, with notifications, with like view controllers are masters of everything. So
Yeah.
they're
Uh,
so hard to maintain and test, and
yeah, and then even like switching to MVVM isn't gonna save you from this
no,
problem,
of
because
course,
moving the logic out of the views just gonna make up for a massive view model. So
yep.
like yeah, just having like completely separate um responsibilities and different components is definitely something that you can get a lot of value from.
Yeah,
And
so
even
no,
things like sorry, like Swift UI as well, like that's not gonna save you from making bad decisions. If anything, maybe it makes it easier for you to make wrong decisions, because it's just like easier to get something going with Swift UI.
yeah, exactly. It's easy to get going, and then you kind of fall into continuing on that route, and there's no separation of concerns. There's no new components that emerge. You're kind of UI driving everything, which we know where it leads. So awesome, Thor. Thanks for sharing all of that. Just to close up our session today, which I think was really useful to other developers as to us as well. So if a company wants to reach out to you, if they're looking for an iOS developer or want to get in contact with you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, it's unlikely that I'll be like seeking a new position anytime soon, because I'm actually starting a new one next week. But if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on like LinkedIn at John Gers.
Awesome.
And yeah,
Awesome. So again, thank you, John, for coming to the podcast and sharing your story. Just good luck with all your endeavors, and keep in touch. Like I said, I want to hear more about what you achieve in the following months and years. And if you want to learn more, just visit us at essentialdeveloper.com, and there you can find a bunch of free resources to improve your iOS dev skills. And you can also find us on the social channels: YouTube, Twitter, X, and more. So thank you, and
yep.
see you soon.